What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. We are presenting two gentlemen every week. And we don't have to introduce them, but you know, I love these guys. You love them too. So let's go ahead and introduce them anyway. Recording from his camera mic. So excuse the difference in audio this week, but he is the jack of all trades who has mastered them all. The senior editor of Sherdog.com, my man, Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, I'm doing really well. It's good to be here with you guys. Plenty to talk about.
Absolutely. And of course, the panel is anchored every week by the man with the stats, the facts, and the figures and the numbers. He is the associate editor of Sherlock.com, slightly under the weather today, but pushing through for his Jordan flu game. The homie Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on?
Boys, this weekend was that kind of weekend where about Thursday or so, it was more like Wednesday night to Thursday morning. I go, uh-oh, something's starting to happen here. But it's the big weekend. You can't stop. You can't, pull out due to injury, late notice, or whatever, stuff like that. So I'm like, 269 is going to happen because it's going to be worth it. And son of a gun, it was worth it. So I sound like garbage, and I'm okay with that as long as you're okay with that. If you're not okay with that, I'm okay with that too. And I'm a little amped up because I had to artificially energize myself. So the stat of the week is equally energizing because it is 18, because Charles Oliveira has finished 18 opponents in his UFC career. Oh my God, 18. That is obviously the record. It's unbelievable what this kid did. I say kid because he's 32 years young. And now that I'm older than him, I feel old, considering how long we've been watching him fight. But this kid he defies the expectations and has 18 finish wins in the UFC. So how can that not be the stat of the week?
It definitely has to be the stat of the week. Charles Oliveira definitely did some work in finishing Dustin Poirier. And while we did, we had a format going to talk about the biggest thing in the fight, but I want to make this a smooth transition. So let's keep this Charles Oliveira discussion going on here. The lightweight division has been sort of haunted by the ghost of Khabib Nurmagomedov. I mean, Dana White very, very famously tried to push and push and push to get this man to come out of retirement. Pretty much anytime he is anywhere near a venue, the camera has to focus on him exclusively in order to highlight that Khabib is still alive and still exists and whatnot. But what Charles Oliveira did was fantastic against Poirier. Do you think it's enough now to where we can put this in the rearview mirror, like the Khabib era is over and we can move on? Is this Charles Oliveira's division right now?
No. I feel terrible saying that, but no. If Khabib Nurmagomedov announces his return today and they schedule a fight in 6 months, Khabib opens as a minus 200 favorite. As long as he's out there and he's favored to beat every lightweight in the game, it's not the post-Khabib era. It's unfair and it's terrible, but there it is.
Jay, what say you?
I think about this the way I think about GSP when he left welterweight. And we knew, because he retired and relinquished his 170-pound title in 2013. And he loomed over the Hendricks matchup and the Hendricks-Lawler and the whole succession after that. And you go, boy, GSP would destroy Robbie Lawler if they fought. But it kind of moved past it just by the excitement of the division. So I think it almost is Khabib can loom because he's still out there, still talking, still squawking, which I think is on purpose, so he can stay in the news and still gain notoriety without actually doing anything. See also Conor McGregor. But you know what's crazy? Charles Oliveira's on a 10-fight win streak now, which is spectacular, and he has four wins in a row over top shelf names, over top 10 opponents at the time. Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Chandler, and Dustin Poirier. Now, he doesn't have to. He can pass Khabib in a couple more wins. This is the most controversial thing I will say in a long time. If Charles Oliveira goes out there, handles Justin Gaethje like I'm fully expecting now, he might submit Gaethje like Khabib did and do things to him, and then beats Islam Makhachev or the winner of Dariush Makhachev and maybe one more name, he's past Khabib in my eyes, because Khabib's run was an incredible run, but it really wasn't, because the window that he beat top shelf opponents was very, very slim. So I think Oliveira's almost there.
I found it very difficult to disagree with you guys but I'm still going to lean in the direction of the Khabib era being firmly in the rearview mirror. And I mean that from a competitive standpoint. Of course, the media cycle is going to keep bringing up Khabib. Of course, Dana's probably still attempting to wine and dine him with steak and, you know, and bottled water or whatever in order to get him to to come back. But at the same time, we're talking about the most entertaining, the most dynamic, the most star-studded division in the UFC. There's no shortage of people to put in front of Oliveira and, you know, and firmly push Khabib out of the thoughts and minds of people, at least during fight night. You know, and I think that's the most important part. But the next question I'm going to pose to you guys, sort of piggybacking off that, do you think he's going to have the opportunity to go on that run to surpass Khabib as a champion with the star-studded division, with Gaethje, with Dariush, with Makhachev, with the skeleton of what was Conor McGregor? Do you think he's going to hold on to this belt for the foreseeable future?
Nobody at lightweight does. I mean, like historically, the record of title defenses is 3, which is the same as heavyweight, which is the hot potato of the UFC. We've always thought Oliveira turned the corner for me in my eyes, because when I played this fight out and I thought that Poirier was going to finish him in the first, and he had moments of that, like he could do it, but he couldn't get the job done, and because Oliveira is a different fighter than even the Paul Felder fight, which is the last fight he lost back in the end of 2017, when, you know, Felder, you guys remember, Felder just said, I'm going to go into your guard, I don't care, and by me hitting you, you won't be able to submit me. Brilliant game plan. And I'm surprised more guys haven't been able to work that on him since, because he's improved so much. I actually believe the reason why I think that when I said earlier that Oliveira can pass Khabib, because Oliveira wants to remain very active. He has said this multiple times. He doesn't want to be a champ that waits and sits and whatever. Like the 7-month wait between May and December, he's like, that was too long for me. I wanted to get back in there sooner, but they didn't have a place for me. Khabib would fight once a year, you know, and that kind of activity. If Oliveira fights, say he gets his wish, fights again in April against Gaethje, that's what he was kind of chirping at, maybe May, depending. And then if the UFC really wants to push it back to like the MSG card to have him fight the winner of Dariush Makhachev and maybe the Khabib 2 kind of thing like that, well, then he's already, if he wins those fights, he's already accomplished 2/3 of what I said he needs to do to pass Khabib by less than a year from now. So I think that this Oliveira is the kind of guy that can do it. And yes, I believe so. And it's maybe that disabled the microphone. But Ben, what do you, have I drank the Kool-Aid? Am I too far?
I can see him passing Nurmagomedov in terms of achievement, but, you know, and I think his specter just still hangs over the division as long as most people think he would beat the champ. And all that's going to, the only thing that will change that is the passage of enough time, like talking about like 3 more years maybe, or him actually coming back. I think, if anything, what might bring him back would be Oliveira beating Makhachev.
I was going to ask, and please answer that, and what I was going to ask. Would the threat of his legacy being in check, say that Makhachev beats Dariush and is next for the title, so there's a lot of what ifs, obviously, but he gets past Gaethje, and then he gets past Makhachev, and now people are talking about he might be better than Khabib because he will be on a 12-fight win streak and all those kinds of things like that. Would that be the thing to get Khabib back out? A new face he hasn't beaten?
I don't know. Maybe, but I'll say this: it will at least start the marketing machine for Khabib again, because there's nothing, there's going to be nothing like that visual of Oliveira submitting or knocking out Makhachev, and then having Khabib the zoom in on Khabib's face in the corner. Yeah, or like whatever post-fight sort of confrontation or stare down that's going to result from that. If Khabib comes in that cage after Oliveira wins and they have the slightest of exchange and it's not just handshakes and congratulations, there's your next commercial. So I don't think everybody's going to let it go at that point, but by then it's sort of like it would be a marketing thing, and it won't be a thing that we necessarily have to worry about as far as reality is concerned if Khabib doesn't want to come back, because the truth of the matter is that he not only would have surpassed him, Oliveira, that is, would have surpassed Khabib as far as the number of title defenses, or still being a champion now and beating more top flight competition in his heyday and whatnot. I don't know if you agree with me or not, baby, but but also it will start eroding, and it will start cutting into Khabib's legacy, because a big part of his legacy now is the fact that he's coaching top level fighters. So if he's going out there and defeating the heir apparent to his throne, I mean, that goes to show that his influence has to stop if he's not competing, that he's no longer a factor in that cage if he is not in that cage. So in that sense, yeah, I think that would answer a lot of questions. Man, Jay, I know you got another thought right there. You want to get?
I do. I've been chewing on something for a couple days now. A lot of and I actually brought this up when I analyzed this fight. People think, oh, Oliveira's got a lot of quit in him. Well, we have to keep in mind at lightweight, his only losses are to 2010 Jim Miller, who is still a top 10 type guy. Donald Cerrone just coming over WEC when he was very, very motivated, and Paul Felder. That's it. That's his only losses at lightweight. The Swanson fight, the Frankie fight, the Max Holloway, my neck hurts, the guillotines from Lamas and Pettis. Those are all at 145, a division he historically couldn't figure out. Like, this is a guy that killed himself to get down to the weight so bad that he missed weight 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and one of the 4 times he missed weight by 10 pounds. So
and then bizarrely would come in like 3 pounds light sometimes,
and then
like his scale was broken,
unreasonably so. But his legacy, this is where the detractors will come in and go, Khabib was undefeated. I mean, yeah, that's correct. But the level of competition that you look at, you go, okay, this is the star-studded guys. Khabib has, I think, 6 or 7 top 15 wins, and if you look at Oliveira, he's coming up real quick, and other guys are too, because lightweight is impossible to stay on top for too long. It has always been impossible. Like, BJ Penn has been arguably the best lightweight ever, and he, how many lightweight fights did he actually have in the UFC? Like 8.
Yeah, definitely good point there. So now let's talk about the flip side of that coin. Dustin Poirier, who previous to this, a lot of people considered the best 155er in the world outside of Khabib, and certainly he's had a banner year up until Saturday night with his dual defeats of Conor McGregor. I mean, what's next for him? I mean, is the undisputed title firmly out of his grasp at this point?
It's not in his hands anymore. It'll, it's going to take some other results breaking one way or another for him even to get another shot in the foreseeable future. What it would mostly take is somebody beating Oliveira. Like, at this point, some of McGregor's stardom has rubbed off on him. Like, Poirier is an enormously popular figure right now. All you need to do is be out there on Twitter or be there in the arena to see what kind of support is behind him. But it would take Gaethje or Makhachev or Dariush beating Oliveira for Poirier to get a title shot anytime in the next 18 months. Like, if Oliveira is still the champ 18 months from now and Poirier has won 3 more fights, then maybe they're looking at redoing this, because it ended up in complete domination, but it was anybody's first round, but that's what it would take. So yeah, it's a bummer because obviously Poirier is a real easy guy to get behind, and every time he comes up against a title opportunity and falls short, it might be his last.
The good thing about Dustin Poirier, he is also 32 years of age. Now, he is a very hard-lived, hard-fought 32. I would argue he is a much older and fight miles 32 than Charles Oliveira, but then maybe not, because Oliveira has gone through some ringers too. He hasn't really gone through the ridiculous battles and the I can't see straight for 3 days kind of battles. But yeah, I think Duffy, you're right. I think it probably will take. Like Gaethje is the next test. Like all of my professing that Oliveira is the next guy, the Arab, the one that could do it all. Well, if Gaethje beats him, Poirier's a win away from a title shot. Period. Because he has the win over him, and Gaethje wants that back. If this what if happens and Gaethje beats Oliveira in a couple months, and Poirier fights. Jeez, I don't know, Tony Ferguson. I don't know who the heck he'd fight. But if
I'd say Chandler.
If he fights a Chandler, and then because someone's got to win and get back up there, if he beats Chandler, yeah, he's fighting Gaethje next for the title, because that's a the champ calls out a challenger title fight because he wants to avenge the big loss he has. But yeah, I mean, Ben, you hit it so hard on the nose. Every title shot could be his last because he doesn't have former champ attack. I mean, he has interim champ, but that doesn't mean much. I mean, look at some other fighters. Had he had former lightweight champion, he's always 2 wins away from it. But because of this, he is a good while from it. And this is going to be the saddest thing I'll say today. Conor McGregor is closer to a title shot right now than Dustin Poirier.
Good Lord.
Disagree. I disagree with what I said wholeheartedly, but I will defend my ability to say it. But it is so painful that Conor could get a title shot before Poirier right now.
I mean, the truth of the matter is he could get a title shot like right now. Like, if of course, obviously his leg has to be healed and he's got to be cleared to compete again. But this was the perfect scenario for him. I just don't want to see that. I'll echo the sentiments of a friend of the show, Greg, from, I think he's at Athletic now. Greg Rosenstein, when he said, like, if McGregor gets a title shot, we riot. Like, we're gonna burn this broadcast down if that's gonna happen. How ridiculous
It'd be the worst.
would it have to be?
It would be worse than Chael getting the shot, Aldo getting the shot, Romero getting the shot off of those losses. It'd be even worse than all those.
Yeah,
I mean, those were bad.
Yeah, but this will probably be the worst, like the most undeserved title shot outside of some sort of last minute freak occurrence, like a Joe Soto, debuting in the UFC with a title shot.
Joe Soto is for real, man.
Cue Bellator clip, on your timeline of
he's the original Bellator champion.
Yep, the first ever Bellator champ.
Sure.
Yeah. So fellas, let's keep things pushing here, because we're going to flip the script just a little bit here. Normally we wait later in the broadcast to ask the age-old question, how's Taste My Crow? But man, I think we all need to go ahead, sit down, put on a bib, get your knife and fork ready, and have a healthy serving of crow, because we, along with pretty much anyone else who is of any note in the world of mixed martial arts, made it very clear that Julianna Pena was going to die out there. Like, this was going to be the slaughterhouse to define slaughterhouses. Amanda Nunes would continue her ridiculous reign as the greatest woman to ever step foot in a cage. That's not what happened. Julianna Pena went out there and shut everybody up with a stunning submission win over Amanda Nunes in the second round. Now she is the UFC's bantamweight champion. Swing or miss, this was the biggest upset in MMA history.
Miss. It's number 2 after Sarah over St. Pierre. I definitely put it over Holm versus Rousey, because as soon as Holm versus Rousey was over, I said, okay, if they run this fight back 5 times, it looks like that every single time. That just kind of laid bare what was already in place, that a niftier striker was going to be able to take advantage of Ronda Rousey. But in terms of how it actually happened, Sarah's title shot in the first place against St. Pierre was just as unlikely and just as ridiculous as Pena's. He's a blown up 5'6" former lightweight who won a comeback to the UFC best of the rejects season of The Ultimate Fighter, had never been known for knockout power before. I mean, he was a grappler, and he knocked out the best guy in the sport, like into tapping to strikes. It's still the most shocking outcome, like of the UFC, like modern era.
And here's why I disagree, and I'm like that we can have this contention. Because at the time, GSP wasn't the GSP that we had all known him to be. Now, I will say the run that GSP had gone on to take the title from Matt Hughes and avenge that loss to him was Mayhem Miller, back when Mayhem Miller was known basically for his Super Brawl fights in Hawaii. Twinkle Toes Trigg, Sean Shirk, who, wasn't really a welterweight, but what are you going to do? BJ, and that was a really close one. And then he kicked Matt Hughes in the head. So he was on a good run in the UFC, but he wasn't a established champion. He was a heavy favorite and an obvious stylistic matchup ahead of him because he had the ability to, do whatever he wanted. And people thought if there was any way that Sarah would win that fight, it would be by submission, like Matt Hughes caught him in the armbar. But Sarah stopped him with strikes. But the reason why I believe the Pena one was so much more significant for a couple reasons. Because historically and statistically, this isn't a gender-based judgment call. This is historically and statistically, puncher's chance isn't a thing in women's divisions. It is so very rare when strikes change the nature of a fight. And Pena is not known as a striker. She is as much of a striker as Matt Serra, in my eyes. But Amanda Nunes was on a win streak that was over all the champions. All the champions. Everyone who had ever held the title in that division, she had smoked. I think she smoked all of them. Rousey smoked her. Tate destroyed her. Cyborg, that was another division. But Nunes was on that unstoppable death march of a run that we laughed at the idea that Pena would get it. Now, Sarah wasn't a top anything guy. He was a guy who won a title shot by winning a reality show with a really lousy fight over Chris Lytle to get it that a lot of people thought he lost. But Pena was only on a one-fight win streak, and she had been submitted by a kickboxer beforehand. And Jermaine Duran's only submission win was against Julianna Pena. So Nunes was at the absolute precipice of her height of her power. Had Matt Serra fought GSP after GSP had beaten Johnny Hendricks, and GSP was on that really long run, and put him away then, that would be it. But because Nunes was where she was, I have to give that the biggest upset. And I accept Duffy's argument, and I'm not dismissing it one iota because it's also a very legitimate one. I feel that Nunes was bigger.
Yeah, this is sort of a 1A 1B argument in my opinion, but I'm leaning towards you on this one, Jay, because we didn't have the legendary GSP in before us. It wasn't like whenever GSP made the walk at this point, it was like, oh my God, this is the greatest person that we've ever seen do this. We were having those conversations about Amanda Nunes for the past couple of years now. And every time we saw her, I mean, even look at some of the reactions to like the weigh-ins and the stare downs and whatnot, and just her walking in, like Julianna Pena walking into the arena. It was like she was on her own death march. And we saw the video from the stare down at the weigh-ins where it looked like Pena realized what was before her and just shriveled up in her own brain. And we saw this and we're like, oh yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. Like this is going to happen. GSP was still on his ascent. Like I think maybe a better point to put. I wouldn't say even after the Hendricks fight, because by then he already had surpassed a lot of historical markers.
Oh right, I was just thinking of the end of the long win streak.
Like more like Thiago Alves after the Alves fight.
Yeah, sure.
To then put Matt Serra there and Matt Serra win. That sounds more appropriate. But yeah, I'm with you on this one, Jay. Certainly the biggest upset in MMA history in my eyes, and quite frankly, I think off the top of my head, the only two the only two upsets in combat sports, period, that I might put above that will be Buster Douglas over Tyson and maybe Ali over Foreman at the Rumble in the Jungle. Off the top of my head, but you know,
And
I'm
sure.
sure.
No Sokaju?
Sokaju definitely is in like the top 10 or top 15, maybe, if we're talking about overall combat sports. But each one of those that I said before
had the stakes on them.
They had the stakes, they had
you.
legends that like firmly, these guys are legends and they are these dominant champions, just ripping through everyone. Sokaju didn't have that upset win. So all right, fellas, let's keep things pushing here. We're going to move things along to shallow cuts. Now, we're going to give ourselves, in fact, we got a little time today. We're making good time. So how about this? We're going to give a minute instead of 30 seconds. Let me go ahead and adjust the clock. And I think, you know what? I think our fourth question, we're going to withhold that for like a real discussion. So let me go ahead and divvy some of these out. Ben, I believe I should start with you on this one. Let me adjust that. All right, now, can Dominick Cruz climb back into the title picture? You have 1 minute, my man.
I think that's the wrong question to ask. I think the question to ask is, how cool is it that Dominick Cruz has climbed back into the title picture? He's 1 win away. They match him up next against Jose Aldo. Even if they match him up against Rob Font, who's coming off a loss, I think Dominick Cruz might only be one more win away from a title shot. And in a night full of truly surprising outcomes, I mean, I'm saying this as a guy who drank beer out of a shoe in penance for making a wrong pick on the Sherdog recap. Dominick Cruz working his way back into title contention at age 37, with his history of injuries and given his style, which never seemed to be set to age well, is really, really remarkable. But yeah, he's there and it's cool. I'm here for it.
Yeah, well, with the extra time we have on the clock, man, it's clearly not prime version of Cruz. Like, you see, like, he's a step slower. We see like his reactions aren't as sharp as they were, but man, he's still doing it at the highest level. Incredible.
Can I ask you a very quick sub question to that? Which one of these resurgences is more impressive to you guys? You can be a short answer. Cruz or Aldo?
It's still Aldo.
Aldo.
Yeah.
Like with Cruz, it's I can't believe he's still doing it. With Aldo, it's like he's doing something that's almost completely different. He's made himself into a different fighter.
Yeah.
Will Cruz have to do that soon? I mean, he got hurt bad in the first round, and he came back and did his thing, but there's a time that he won't be able to do that revamp of himself.
You know what? And maybe this is going to sound crazy, and please, by all means, kill me in the comments if I'm totally off base. And gentlemen, obviously the floor is yours to stab me right in the throat for this one. But I'm inclined to think that if Dominick Cruz were to do a sort of Aldo rebrand, he would have to go a weight class up as opposed to down. I think having the extra weight might be better for him with this style. Like, he could, if he were to increase his muscle mass, he'd have a little bit more insulation from injury. His body would probably be a little more durable. It would allow him to train the way he needs to for that footwork, and maybe it would give him a more solid base to insulate himself from getting hurt unnecessarily. And he would most likely still retain a lot of the speed and whatnot. His reaction time would still be the same because, you know, you can't exactly bench press that up or down. So I think that might be the best thing for him if he wants to have an Aldo sort of rebrand. But him at 135 looks pretty damn good. Yet he's not going to get to the belt again. I don't believe, not as long as Jan holds it. So.
There's something that I'm interrupting again. There's something that you and Keith do on your show, and it's a question you raise about who gets the call, is what you guys would say, which basically is there's a title shot on the line. Who is the first person to get it?
Sterling falls out of the Jan fight again in the first quarter of 2022. Who gets the call?
Yeah, Cruz is not far away.
I think
he's right behind Aldo.
Yeah.
Aldo and Cruz are the next two.
Well, Cruz would probably get that call because we just saw Aldo lose to Jan. So
actually, that is a good point. That is a fresh matchup for Jan because because Cruz got beat up by Cejudo.
Yeah, and see now, like this kind of throws into in the disarray what I kind of wanted to see happen with the division. Like for the longest time, I was calling for Cruz versus Aldo to be the fight.
I want it too.
I mean, and that's a logical fight to make now. I still think Aldo would absolutely run the floor with Cruz, and I kind of don't want to see it for that reason. But now, but I was like, well, how about Cruz versus Edgar, which is another fight that sounds fantastic, something I'd love to see. But now it's like, man, Cruz would probably wipe the floor with Edgar at this point. I don't know if I really want to see that. So now it's just either scenario makes sense but doesn't. So Cruz is kind of in a weird spot here in my opinion.
Cruz, Edgar, Aldo, TJ for a 4-man OG champion tournament.
I can dig that.
Not saying they would do it, but who would you favor if the UFC says, okay, Sean O'Malley, you've earned your shot at another big name. Let's see if you're ready for prime time, and they book him and Cruz in the first half of next year?
Cruz,
yeah. I'd say Cruz.
Because he took what Pedro Munoz could offer.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I mean, Sean O'Malley has sniper power, but he doesn't, I don't really think he has that kind that will be able to hit Cruz and put him down for good, which is good, Ant, that you said that we were going to save one question for a general discussion, and this was obviously the one that you didn't.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on here, Jay. I'm going to throw one your way. After attempting to gouge Gillian Robertson's eye, what is an appropriate punishment for Priscila Cachoeira?
Make her fight Valentina Shevchenko again. Like, really? Get her out of here. Get her out of the UFC. She doesn't belong here. Oh, geez, I couldn't figure out what the hell was happening there. Not only because her record was so abysmal, she should have been cut back in 2019 when she lost 3 in a row and showed no signs of life. But then she got lucky by fighting, this feels so mean to say, but the lowest 2 flyweights on the roster in Shayna Dobson and Gina Mazzani, except when Shayna Dobson fights Maria Akapova, because that's a whole weird rigmarole thing there. Cachoeira, get her, send her. I don't even think she should go to like a feeder league or a regional promotion. She should go back to like Curitiba Top Fight or Hypno's Fight 3, like an organization that she can headline some card in Brazil and beat up on nobody, because get her all the way out of here.
Jay, I can't disagree with that. I would go a step further. I'd say ban her from the sport, period.
Oh, okay.
Because that's one of those things where you can't, like, the person who is victimized by that level of cheating can't come back from.
No.
George Gordeau, if I'm remembering this correctly, permanently blinded one of his opponents.
Yuki Nakai?
Yep. Permanently blinded the man. And he competed, many times after this. But while that man could no longer see, and he had to end his career early because of these vision problems, the other man, the offender, was out there making money and performing. Shouldn't be the case. If you do something like that, something that egregious that could literally alter the trajectory of someone's life outside of the cage, get them all the way the fuck up out of there.
I mean, Paul Harris, I mean, he gouged out Jake Shields' eyes, something fierce. Yeah. And I think he did get kicked out of America, actually. Yeah. As it were. I don't believe he's fought in the States since.
Yeah, and that sounds more than appropriate. Of course, there's a promoter anywhere who will happily book a UFC vet, no matter how lowly of a UFC vet they may be, to get some extra butts and seats. So be it. But this woman doesn't belong anywhere near anything considered high level competition, and in fact, I would say no competition, period, because the lower level opponents that she will likely beat up on are subject to whatever sort of lashing out she feels like giving. So get her all the way to hell up out the sport. She should be baking cookies by the end of the recording. She should be out of the UFC, out of mixed martial arts, not allowed to be sanctioned, etc. Peace. So all right, so I'll go ahead and
I want to ask you a question.
Yes,
Instead of you giving
please.
your own question. So you saw at the end of the broadcast, and I think this was just something that you, Ben, and Keith were confused about. At the very end of your show, we're like, oh, crap, we have to talk about bonuses because there were so many bonuses. And the UFC decided to open up its piggy bank for some reason and go, yeah, I know we just 2 weeks ago whined about that we can't give bonuses because of our bottom line. And then the report came out that so we've had our most profitable quarter by a crazy amount. So maybe we can give out 8 post-fight bonuses. So why this card? What did this card deliver more than others? I don't know.
Well, let's just say. Oh,
well, no, sorry. The question was for Ant. Never mind.
For Ant first.
All right, so this for sure was a card that deserved to have multiple bonus winners. There were stellar performances from top to bottom, and these fighters put on a show. Let's not take anything away from that, but let's not also take anything away from the UFC's PR moves. This was a PR move because this is not the first time that they've done this in recent memory. What was just like 2 weeks ago they gave out an extra bonus, like. And I think their efforts to kind of shut people up about fighter pay and the show win system and the bonus structure and whatnot, I think it's going to make those calls even louder, or it makes it more glaringly apparent that this is simply at their will, at their mercy. They just say, hey, let them eat cake, and they throw a few dollars out to a few people. This was simply to keep people like us quiet. That's all it was. Nothing more, nothing less. And while those fighters did all deserve it, and this should be happening every fight. This should be happening every card. We shouldn't even be on the pay system that they're on now. This is simply a PR distraction from that fact.
But then you also feel good for the guys that got bonuses that might not have otherwise. So it's tough because you look at a guy like Kayla France, who did horrible things to Cody Garbrandt at flyweight, and we go, okay, that was a bonus-winning knockout, but it might not have been otherwise. Like last week, if that knockout were there, it wouldn't have been on the top.
Yeah, but that's the let them eat cake mentality.
Yeah.
If they're eating cake, hey, we're taking care of everyone. But don't look at the fact that so many people fighting for 10 and 10, and don't look at the fact that the Contender Series is the quote unquote puppy mill, and we're letting go of talent that deserves to get paid a lot more. This is simply a PR move that costs them literally nothing. This is pennies to them. So I'm not falling for it. I can't just say, hey, they're being generous and smile and tap dance away. No, thank you. Fellas, so let's keep things moving here. Unless Ben, you wanna add to that at all?
Well, if they're gonna increase bonuses, to make it look like the fighters are getting paid better, it's not enough paint to cover the wall. I mean, Andre Muniz just recorded his 3rd straight first round submission. I mean, the guy wrenched Jacare Souza's arm and didn't get an extra check for it. Just got another first round submission, didn't get a bonus for it. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, get rid of the show and win system and just give a bonus for finishes.
The only thing I'm okay with about the Muniz situation that he didn't get a bonus is because he asked for one. And I am of the very, very draconian mind that if you ask for a post-fight bonus in your interview, you shouldn't get one. Now, that isn't to say that you should be paid more to begin with, so you don't have to ask for a bonus. But I don't know. I don't. The 50G baby just. I don't know. I don't like it.
You're cruel.
Ige officially Jay's least favorite fighter.
Man, Ige.
All right, gentlemen. So we had one shallow cut question that I think prompts itself to a little bit.
I know, and I tried to transition into it.
Yeah. Then we went on a tangent elsewhere.
I like it.
I saw what you were doing there.
I like it.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Kayla France made quick work of Cody Garbrandt, barely cracked a sweat in his knockout win. But now let's talk about Cody, the former bantamweight champion, attempted a rebrand at 125, and that obviously is off course now. So what do we do next with Cody?
Feel bad saying this about a 30-year-old guy, but he should consider retirement. Just It is a fun size Luke Rockhold at this point. He has the offensive weapons. He looks physically okay at 2 weight classes. Like, he looked physically better at flyweight than TJ Dillashaw did, but his chin and a fight style that puts his chin on the gunnery range was his problem at bantamweight. It's an even worse problem at flyweight, where the other guys are faster and he's more dehydrated. And the idea that nobody has power at flyweight is kind of a 5 to 7 year old idea. There are plenty of guys that can crack at that weight at this point. You know, like, do either of you think of Kai Kara-France as an especially heavy-handed flyweight?
No,
he's a solid hitter.
He's accurate. That's probably the more damning thing about his striking style.
Like, forget Davison. Francisco Figueiredo would have knocked Cody Garbrandt out.
Oh, he would have dislodged his brainstem.
Like, Mom Figueiredo would have knocked Cody Garbrandt out. Like,
yeah, yeah, man, and it's crazy because that we're talking about a man this young at this stage of his career, but you know, it just goes. I don't know how many miles he left as a boxer, because he had like a 25 fight boxing career, if I'm not mistaken on that.
He had double digit boxing matches. A lot of them were kind of like, 4 and 6 rounders, like local club type stuff. But yeah, I mean, that means hundreds, if not thousands of hours in the gym. No. Like, he's taken more head trauma than his 13 or 14 fight career would indicate.
He turned pro? I thought he was only amateur. Cody, we're talking about.
Let me look it up on BoxRec. I don't know.
Well, while you're looking that up and to fill dead air, I think he is in such a horrible predicament, having been the guy to beat Dominick Cruz and become a champion. Like, we've talked about this, and I will always say that I've always talked about this just to emphasize this point. You've won the title. You're not going to get easy fights. And Cody Garbrandt needs a breather. His last 6 fights are Dillashaw, Munoz, Asuncao, Rob Font, and number 6 Kai Kara-France. This isn't an easy fight among them, and I don't mean easy by like a 1 and 2 UFC fighter. I mean, maybe it's time to take a step back in level of competition, regain your confidence, regain your composure, fix a couple things instead of going against the guys who are going to hurt you. Now, Ben, what you said about, or whomever said, well, I'm already foggy, about Kai Kara-France not being a heavy hitter. I mean, yeah, that's true, but he still is a top level guy who has proved himself by smashing, what was it, Rogerio Bonta, I think, in his last fight. So it wasn't a Sue Madarji who's on his way up and could get a name off somebody. I think Cody needs to go back up to bantamweight. I think 2, he needs to fight like a Frankie Edgar or somebody on the fringe of the contention to kind of weed out. And I say this not because I hate Frankie, but because I think you can do a couple things with older fighters, and I say older, he's 30, but well-traveled fighters that are kind of on the way down after interesting careers, is to pit them against each other, to knock one of them out of contention, or you feed him to a young lion. I don't want to see him fight Sean O'Malley. I think that Cody could probably still win that fight, but if he loses badly, then what do? You lost to an unranked Sean O'Malley. There's nothing for you there. So I think just slow it down a little bit. I don't know, fight. I don't know. Song, no, you can't do that. Your teammates. Cody Stamen, a fringe guy who is kind of looking for something, because just you keep fighting killers, you're probably going to get killed most of the time. Now,
I'll see. I looked up. I don't see him on BoxRec. So Jay, you're probably right. This is.
I know he was an amateur boxer, but
his career is probably all amateur.
Yeah.
But I mean, you said exactly what's going to happen, despite you not wanting it to happen. I would love to see Garbrandt versus Edgar more than anything, more than any other combination, because I think it makes the most sense. That's going to be an easy fight to put together since they share management, but it's going to be O'Malley. This is so going to be O'Malley's fight, or O'Malley fights Edgar. It's going to be one of the other, simply because if they want to push Sean O'Malley into ranked fights, this is the easiest path. He himself has said he's not going to be just taking on, anybody that they throw in front of him that ranks high enough because he's not getting paid anymore. This is going to be the easy stepping stone for him. Sean O'Malley would wipe the floor with this version of Cody Garbrandt.
The pain in Ben's eyes, I can feel it in my soul right now.
With his chin that depleted, with Kai Kara fronts.
With who? Edgar or Cody's?
With Cody. with Kai Kara fronts, able to knock out Cody Garbrandt, and he is not a heavy hitter. He's someone who will lay strikes on you accurately, but he's not known for devastating power. O'Malley is much more accurate. He's so precise with it. Now, will Cody fall for one of his little dance moves into some wild uppercut? Maybe not. But if O'Malley fights like he has half a brain, Garbrandt will be missing the other half of his brain.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I still try to be very aware of what O'Malley has actually accomplished and has not accomplished, and temper my excitement about him as a prospect. But I feel confident that Sean O'Malley would absolutely lamp Cody Garbrandt. Just everything about it. Like Garbrandt's chin, obviously. The fact that O'Malley is a dancer and a sniper, and Garbrandt still has that dog mentality where if somebody hurts him, he wants to get it back right away. It's how Pedro Munoz destroyed him. Like Pedro Munoz is a guy that we think needs a break, and he thrashed Garbrandt. Like Garbrandt is a whole other degree past Munoz of needing a break. And I hate both of you because I assume that in both of your houses, you got a little step ladder that you get on when you need to change a light bulb or an air filter, and you call that thing Frankie Edgar. Why are you going to do the man like that?
Hey,
sometimes
I just need a little help. Yeah.
Hey, and quite honestly, O'Malley would do the same to Frankie Edgar at this point.
If Edgar has a weird way of closing the distance, so and does O'Malley really throw knees that often? I'm trying to picture it. I think he's more of a straight boxer, but I picture Edgar trying to close the distance on him and doing what he did to Yair, what he did to him.
I just don't think it's going to go that smoothly. I see him getting pieced up on the way in. Yeah. I see him attempt getting it on the floor even and realizing O'Malley has a disgustingly underrated ground game. Yeah, man, that doesn't sound like a good night. I mean, O'Malley is playing with house money as far as that's concerned. It's just a matter of whether he feels that those fights, he can take without the pay raise that he wants. That's really more the question, and which one of them would he prefer fighting? But if you want to keep them safe, if you want to extend their life any much more, Garbrandt versus Edgar is the way to go. Kills off one, but the other one can live for a couple more fights. So there's that. Let's move things on to the greatest title segment in all of media history. That's I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not over the course of the past week. Jay, I'm going to begin with you. What's your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
So in the last show, I discussed how Khabib's organization, Eagle FC, is coming to the United States and holding an event January 28th in Miami. And it was going to be headlined by Tyrone Spong after who knows how long away, 8, 9, 10 years? I forget. 2013, I think, is when he fought for World Series. And Bigfoot Silva. And oh my God, war crime of matchmaking, all that kind of stuff. Well, for some reason, apparently, maybe an injury, maybe cooler heads prevailed, maybe something, I don't know. Well, Bigfoot Silva is no longer fighting the main event of this card. And Tyrone Spong has a much more battle-tested and probably going to take him out opponent in Sergei Kharitonov. And I, for one, am surprised, Mr. Falcons, that they replaced Bigfoot Silva with such an actually better opponent across the board. And because this looked like a squash match. Spong was going to get up there, come out of his I don't do MMA because I don't have to deal with takedowns, and just absolutely ice Bigfoot Silva, and everybody's really sad about it. Now he's going against Kharitonov, who can not only smash him up on the feet or knee him in the chest, but he can roll for a toe hold because what is this happening? So I lampooned the matchmaking because it was atrocious. Now I still think 2-0 Tyrone Spong against, God, I don't even know how many fights Sergei Kharitonov has.
I'm going to guess he's 31-8 without looking.
50 fight veteran and going against 2-0 Tyrone Spong in MMA, which is the other side of the egregious matchmaking, yet some reason I feel better about it. So I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons.
Spong, TKO, leg kicks, round 1.
Oh.
Yeah, that's going to be brutal. All right. Ben, you ready for I'm not surprised?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, obviously the T-Mobile Arena came unglued in the wake of the co-main event, depending on where you sit on this panel, the greatest or second greatest upset in UFC history. One would-be reveler is UFC welterweight contender and sometime desk analyst and part-time tequila salesman Michael Chiesa, who, perhaps they've been paying him in stock, not talking about like stock in the company, but actual stock of tequila, because he drunkenly tried to enter the octagon, slipped, broke his face, and had to be escorted out of the arena by police. I mean, one, I'm sure that he was just thrilled to see, Sick Jitsu get its first UFC champion. Who would have thought it would be Julianna Pena and not him? But really shocking, because Chiesa has this kind of like weird Jekyll and Hyde type personality where normally he just seems to be a very even-keeled guy. He's a good analyst. Like, he went from kind of awkward to, I think he's a really good desk analyst at this point, and kind of seems to be a level-headed guy as a fighter. But then we'll have just odd episodes like Kevin Lee saying something very, very innocuous about his mom and him just going completely berserk. And then now this, his literally slip and fall on my face moment, like, his eye was all busted up. So, yeah, I am legitimately surprised at that.
You know what? That was actually the same moment that I was going to highlight, because it was just so ridiculous. But I'll take another angle of it. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, comes from some of the other reactions to Pena's upset win, namely that of Kayla Harrison, who we were just cracking jokes about, was the last pay-per-view event. She was sitting there cage side. The camera showed her and just completely ignored her, and they highlighted whoever was sitting next to her.
Bisping. She was right next to Bisping. Yep.
Right. And they highlighted Bisping and not her.
And they ignored Kayla Harrison.
But this time, Kayla Harrison was all over that broadcast. She was flexing, she was smiling, cameras panning to her for every little thing you can imagine. And then when Nunes fell victim to Pena on rage mode, the disappointment in Kayla Harrison's face clear as she turns away, shouts fuck, and her and Ali look like they just lost a huge chunk of money. I'm not surprised at all that was a reaction, because it seemed very clear from the way they were highlighting her on that broadcast and her free agency, that her free agency was going to be no more, and she was going to be announced as Amanda Nunes' next title challenger at 145. So the bag has been officially fumbled. I'm sure they'll get it back with Cyborg and Bellator if they go that route.
I will add that, yes, I will definitely add that I believe the plan was to actually have Kayla Harrison enter the cage and challenge her and try and drop a line like a George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes. I think the gauntlet would have been thrown.
I'm not a religious guy, but if I were, the whole "if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans" would definitely be my axiom, because like that is just some like Greek tragedy level hubris right there.
Yeah, I mean, it shows you, man. You may not be religious, but you do believe in the MMA gods.
Oh yeah, and they laugh at us all the time.
They don't play that.
I mean, I think it's still a doable fight, because it was always going to be for her other belt anyway. Like, it certainly lost some luster, but it's not a complete like flush the toilet. This matchup is gone. It's just not the blockbuster it would have been.
Well, I mean, it still can be that blockbuster if they book that immediate rematch and she wipes the floor with Pena. Then we're talking about this all over again, because if Nunes corrects that wrong, then it's like, okay, the universe is kind of back in order. And then you can kind of proceed as normal. Maybe a little luster will be off of it. But even still, like, was this fight a lock to begin with, considering that they're training partners? I don't know if they train directly with
Yeah.
one another, but they're both
Amanda
ATT.
already said, yeah, I'm good with it, whatever.
Okay, yeah. So this can still happen. But she needs to get back at Pena first, I think, in order for it to have that blockbuster status. If it happened now, it'll just kind of be, it'll be a big fight, but it just will be another big fight. It won't be a mega fight. So
I'm going to disagree, not with your point, but with the general point that it would have been a mega fight. And I will say this, I will say why. No one knows who Kayla Harrison is. And I don't mean that in disrespect. I don't. I've watched every single one of her fights, including her one-off against Courtney King and Invicta. I know my stuff. I know who Kayla Harrison is. I've been writing about her for years. I am a unicorn. You don't look at me to know, what people are actually paying attention to. No one cares about PFL right now. The ratings for the PFL 2021 season, especially for the championship, were less than half of the last season, which was in 2019, because it took a year off. There's not a massive following to see Kayla Harrison fight her next big thing. That isn't even a media manufactured thing, because even media doesn't believe that. It isn't anything like that. It's almost like a misnomer, like oh man, she's undefeated, so people are clamoring for her to fight. No, they're not, because Kayla Harrison has not done what she could do to establish herself as one of the best fighters in the world. Because she hasn't been able to. Because she fought 3-1 Taylor Guardado for $1 million. I like Taylor Guardado. I've watched all of her fights. But again, there's no actual any substance behind it. And it's really sad, because she's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She should have hype behind her, but she doesn't. And like to this exact point, Kayla Harrison, and I'm using specific numbers on December 13th for points. Kayla Harrison, 2-time Olympic gold medalist. What is she? I forget her record right off the top of my head. Undefeated record, destroyer of worlds. Basically, the only woman she has gone the distance with is Larissa Pacheco. Amazing, incredible, all these things. 160,000 followers on Instagram. Julianna Pena, mid-level UFC fighter, 1-fight win streak, whatever. Almost 400,000 followers. And Julianna Pena isn't a household name. Julianna Pena was a bigger name to put against Amanda Nunes than Kayla Harrison. I know Instagram isn't everything. It is a lot when it comes to people actually know who you are. So I mean this in no disrespect, Kayla Harrison. Fight Cyborg. Then you got something.
all right. So 2 things. First, I think Campbell will have some challenge for what you just said, because Julianna Pena is a star because she's on the top-rated Combate's commentary team.
Campbell's got some other issues with me, and we'll talk about them.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about that off air. But then also,
oh my god,
also, I want to segue that into another sort of mini discussion. There is now the bigger bag outside the UFC. Is the bigger bag to now go for that Cyborg fight in Bellator, or is it to re-sign with PFL and hope to get the Clarissa Shields fight, or just re-enter that almost guaranteed $1 million check tournament that she could go in with PFL?
Just to end my point, because I'm about out of gas here, the supposed mega checks that Kayla Harrison is expecting based on pay-per-view points, she has no frame of reference to know that she is any remote pay-per-view draw. In fact, we could say that she isn't, because she fights on a major network in ESPN and ESPN2, and her biggest fight card was 300 and change thousand people watching an ESPN show. It was like the 5th or whatever show this year. Was less than half of UFC's lowest prelim card or something like that. So there's no following for her to say and expect that she is this ultimate massive pay-per-view or whatever draw. And the money she would be getting would probably come from that. I can't imagine there's guaranteed money in the millions of dollars for her, because why would there be? There's no one for her to fight in the UFC besides Amanda Nunes, unless you're going to, well, you can't fight Felicia Spencer anymore. Megan Anderson's no longer under contract. So what do you make her fight? Zara Fire dos Santos? That's the same level of that's slightly better than PFL's, but not really. So her best bag is PFL, because that's $1 million, and she has to do so little work and whatever else they're paying her. Bellator has longevity because they're going to actually be around next year, and we know for certain they'll be around next year. We don't have to question whether the organization will survive. But in terms of short-term startup checks, PFL's it for her.
All right. Sounds good. All right, fellas. Well, you know,
I'm curious what Ben had to say too.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, not a whole lot to add to that. Just that, you know, the people that we know and whose opinions we respect on press row, present in the arena on Saturday, just said that for as much as they put Harrison on the screen, she got no pop. Like, she got less pop than David Spade, and David Spade got no pop because there was no like hologram of Chris Farley next to him, so people would know who the fuck he was.
That was the funniest moment of the whole broadcast. They showed David Spade and no one reacted. It was like I barely knew who he was too. He's the man's aged.
People cheered for Anthony Kiedis next to him, who wasn't even being pointed at more than they did for David Spade.
Anthony Kiedis is a musical legend. With a catalog of hits.
He's a UFC super fan.
By
like
God,
Cindy Crawford, apparently.
That's Dong Hyun Kin's music.
and is that the guy who shot himself in the foot in Point Break?
He was in Point Break. Was he the guy who shot himself in the foot?
I think he was the guy that shot himself in the foot. Like when the ATF agent like kicked the door open and hit his elbow, and he had that. What's that? It's like that Swedish assault rifle. It was like a AUG something, and he shot his foot off. I think that was him that did that.
I think you might be right. Dang, what a good reference, if so.
My action movie knowledge is top notch. You just can't mess with me on the action movies. All right, so wow, my daughter is highly upset, and she's upset for one simple reason. This should have ended the UFC's year. UFC 269 not only being an action-packed card filled with title fights and stars and crazy knockouts and whatnot, this should have been it. We should be wrapping up the UFC's 2021 with some nice year-end discussion. Instead, we're back to the rank and file fight night cards. Derek Lewis takes on Chris Dukakis in the main event. There's also one championship wrapping up their year. Of course, this was probably taped in July, but they're airing it this weekend. and KSW is doing the damn thing as well to wrap up their 2021. Let's just give a brief floor to a couple fights that we might be anticipating from any of these cards.
Well,
Jay,
you joke, but the one championship card is actually pre-recorded. So these fights really did happen in some time in the past. Did they
tape in front of a studio audience this time and
no audience.
Have the laugh track?
No, sir. No, Singapore's really shutting them down. So it could be anywhere between a week to 4 months. We have no idea.
I heard Urkel's going to make a cameo in the season finale, but
that will be more entertaining than some of the fights on this card this weekend because it is good. And then what is that doing here? Grow. Okay, I like that. What is good? Well, Justin Taffa, Harry Hansacker. I don't even want that on LFA. So I'm actually going to not talk about the UFC card, and I'll let you guys talk about it because there is one fight I'm interested in this weekend, and it is not Lewis Dacus. It is not Wonderboy Bilal. It is Mamed Khalidov and Roberto Soldic in KSW in Poland, and that's on. Let's see, it's on Saturday afternoon, but the UFC is airing early, so it's not going to be. I'm not going to be able to watch it because it's going to be running play-by-play at the time. So I'm kind of sad about that. Khalidov is a guy who's 40-something years old. The KSW, one of the all-time greats, the what could have been kind of guys, the one of the best guys to never fight in the UFC kind of thing. And he retired, and then he came back and fought against the guy that beat him, and he jump kicked the guy in the head, and everybody went, "Wait, hold on." What is going on? You're 40-something years old, jump kicking dudes.
Scott Askham, we barely knew you.
Scott Askham. Oh, Scott Askham. So he's fighting one of the other best guys out of the UFC that never fought for the UFC, and Roberto Soldic. And it's just, I think they fought like a combined 50-something fights, and they've only gone the distance 5 times or something like that. Like, this is all the violence for as long as it lasts, and I don't care who wins because I enjoy both of them, and I know it's probably going to be first round flying head kick that gets countered and right hand something nonsensical and awesome. So if KSW does anything like what they've always done forever, it's going to be ridiculous and hilarious. And I wish Ben Duffy was writing a minute by minute about this fight card.
Ben, any particular fights that you want to highlight from the weekend?
I mean, obviously the top 2 fights on this fight night card are awesome and fun. It'll be fun to see Cub Swanson, who, I mean, sometimes finds a way to lose even when he's the more talented fighter, against Darren Elkins, who often finds a way to win even when he's not the most talented fighter. But I'm just going to highlight Don'Tale Mayes versus Josh Parisian, because Josh Parisian is my new favorite fighter. And if you'd like me to explain why, I am happy to. I think I can tell this story like out of class without anybody involved really being mad at me. But one of my local friends here, Jeremy Mahan, coach of War Training Center, used to be with 4 Ounce Fight Club. He's like Trevin Giles, head coach. He posted on his Facebook just this kind of like wackadoodle science story about how there might be genetically identical humans on other planets throughout the galaxy. Just kind of like old school Joe Rogan shit that he would talk about.
Like multiverse type shit? Yeah.
Josh Parisian drops in out of nowhere and he says, "Do you think the humans on the other planets eat ass too?" I don't know if he's the hero we need, but he's the hero we deserve. Go Josh Parisian.
Did he suddenly become my favorite fighter?
I mean, he's a heavyweight that hits spinning back fist, so he was already up on my list as is.
He's the guy that showed me that like the Dana White's Contender Series fight kits are not the same as the UFC ones, because he would throw spinning back fist and have to hike his shorts up after each spin. It was great. I love Josh Parisian.
All right, well, I definitely was going to give a little bit of love to Cub Swanson and Darren Elkins, because that promises to be action-packed and crazy. But we're going to go in a different direction, because you guys have already pointed to some of the merits of that, because there's a fight card that we haven't talked about, at least not this week. That's Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley 2, which actually it looks like the UFC is avoiding by putting their fight card on early. So one fight that I want to highlight from this farce of a card, Darren Williams versus Frank Gore. To see basketball versus football in a boxing match just goes to show how twisted and disturbed this world is. What a circus.
I was literally about to say, oh man, another guy named Frank Gore. But then I realized you meant that Frank Gore.
Yeah, that Frank Gore.
Oh,
that Frank Gore.
I think he just had a stroke.
Kill me.
What?
He just had a stroke. Oh, man. So I guess I'll wrap things up by telling my Frank Gore story. All right.
Please.
So a sports bar that I worked at back home. One time, I guess he played for the 49ers at the time. They were in town to play the what was the Washington football team, without saying that horribly racist name. But anyway, they were in town. They came to, at least Frank Gore, he came to the bar that I worked at. And this one girl that I work with just suddenly turned super groupie. And of course she gives him her phone number or whatever. And then when she leaves, when he leaves, to not look like a groupie to the rest of the staff, she's like, well, we're from the same city. I think she was from Miami or something. She's like, we're from the same city, so I just thought it'd be cool to catch up. Like, okay, we know you got smashed in the hotel room. Let's not lie. That was my Frank Gore story. I'll throw my own stories in whenever I can. So there's that.
I like it.
Hey man,
Chris?
Journeyman fullbacks, that they get all the trim apparently.
apparently easy pickings right there for journeyman fullbacks. Yeah, man. So I guess that's going to do it for this edition of Unleashed. Big thanks to Ben and Jay for jumping in, especially Ben. You get the Jordan Flu Game Award coming in here, holding it down despite the illness. So you know what to do this weekend. You can check out their coverage of the fights on SureDog.com. Like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell a friend to tell 10 more friends. Stay beautiful. Stay positive. Don't gouge out your opponent's eyes. and stay sexy. Actually, no, wait. I'm a Krav Maga guy. Gouge their eyes out and stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.